continue our knowledge sharing mission through a series of interviews with marketing leaders from all over the world. And today we are thrilled to have Louis here with us.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Louis.
Hi, Andrea. I'm Louis from Adyen, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Great to have you here, Louis. Louis, you know what? Why don't we start with you? Why don't you start by telling us a bit more about yourself and your role as interim global head of marketing at Adyen?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm a Frenchman, but I'm based in Amsterdam. This is where Adyen is headquarters. I've spent the past decade in enterprise B2B tech marketing, mostly living and breathing product marketing. But a few months ago, I stepped up to lead our global marketing function at Adyen, which is quite a large distributed marketing engine that's distributed across global and local teams.
Sounds great. Sounds great, Louis. And you know that I'd love to hear more about that transition from the product marketing going into, the global marketing aspect of Adyen. So I'd love to hear more of that, how the transition was. Tell us more about how it was stepping in from product marketing and then going into the global marketing as well.
For years, I've been telling the people that I manage and coach, you only grow when you step outside of your comfort zone. And so what I can tell you is that I'm definitely growing. I definitely had to step out of my comfort zone, and I feel I've been learning a lot. But all jokes aside, it's been really a great ride. It's full of ups and downs and lots of learning. I think if I look back at the previous few months, it started with battling a bit the imposter syndrome, right? And the awkwardness that comes with suddenly managing people that were your peers, right? And of course, at the beginning, you ask yourself, how am I going to be credible, about this? Are people going to listen to me? Are they going to let me challenge them? Are they going to challenge me? Or are they going to see me just, as an imposter who's keeping the seat warm, right? And so, but also stepping out of my comfort zone in the sense that I've been mostly doing product marketing for the past few years. And there I had to really figure out adjacent domains like brand, like demand gen, more revenue-driven marketing types, creative ops. And it's been a lot of learning. And I think I survived by realizing that, I don't need to have all the answers. Maybe it's not with my product marketing expertise that I add value. I think it's just about listening a bit more.
I am, and you know what? I'd be curious to know, Louis, since when you stepped out from product marketing, were there any aspects from product marketing that helped you with your new journey? Were you like, actually these aspects from product marketing, having these in mind, really helped you with, for example, the field marketing or event marketing or other aspects as well?
That's an excellent question. I would say yes, in the sense that the product marketing role typically requires you to connect the dots between different worlds, like the product world, the sales world, the marketing world. And so I think the best product marketeers are really adept at understanding the context coming from these different groups and audiences and domains, and then trying to find where they intersect and trying to make it that crisp and finding that value there. And I think if I look back at the past few months, it's been also a lot about understanding the domain of brand and demand gen and the other domains and still the needs from the business and trying to find that value at the intersection, connecting all those dots, right? So
Definitely.
I realized that product marketeers are well equipped to grow into a marketing organization, right?
You kind of mentioned that during your transition, you spoke about the change in altitude. So, going from managing team leads to then leading VPs, leading your peers. And what has been the biggest mindset shift in becoming a leader of leaders?
Of course, managing product marketing team leads when you've done 10 years doing product marketing yourself is one thing. You have a lot of credibility and expertise in their domain, which means you understand their pains, you've walked a mile in their shoes, basically. And that means that when they come up to you for guidance or with a problem, you intuitively find the unlock, because of that experience that you have. But when you shift to managing highly experienced VPs, it's completely different because you don't have that expertise in their domain. They're also more senior and more experienced, so the type of problems and needs that they have from you are completely different. And so initially it was a lot of like the art of nodding intelligently, like while my brain was trying to, desperately understand what they meant. And I think my main takeaway was, hey, it takes a lot more learning, a lot more listening. And this is where I really had to change my altitude, I would say. And once I started doing that, I realized that for me, the biggest change was I stopped looking at individuals or the performance of an isolated project or campaign. And I started like zooming out and looking at more the physics, the organizational physics between the teams, because flying from that different altitude, you see things from a different perspective. And so, yeah, you can start spotting patterns, right? Instead of focusing on events and individual performance of accidents, you start seeing things that repeat themselves. And this is where I found out that I could add value by spotting those patterns and then challenging the leaders in charge of these domains to say, hey, I think this is not an incident. I think this is a pattern and you have an organizational flow there. And let's work together to identify the root cause and fix it structurally, right? And quite often the leaders in charge of these teams, they're so focused into the day-to-day of their teams and the campaigns and the deadlines that they don't necessarily have that time to actually zoom out and spot this. And this is where I found that, hey, maybe I can add value there.
Yeah, I think that's very curious. Also, and also very smart on your part, Louis, to manage it from that perspective, I think. Now, you also on the last time we spoke, you mentioned that you recently published an article called the 4R formula. I'd love to hear more about that. You said it was a framework for B2B marketing. Could you walk us through the 4Rs and what inspired you to develop this approach as well?
Yeah, I think that's one of the quirks that the team has learned about me, is that I love to think in frameworks and acronyms because I think it makes things more memorable. And so I'm always looking for the next, catchphrases of formula. And I think the 4R formula is really about simple observation, right? Is that if you look at most B2B marketing organizations, the people that are in charge of finding out what is relevant to our buyers, in many organizations, that's your product marketing team or your go-to-market team. They're usually sitting in the different teams than the people that are in charge of creating the content, building the content to tell these stories. And it's often yet another team that is in charge of building the campaign to make sure the content reaches the right people. The result of this fragmentation is that quite often we get bored of our own content before the market even notices it. We tend to jump from one topic to another without really establishing any authority. And so sometimes we have great hyper relevant content, but it's like buried deep inside a blog post that nobody's looking at. Meanwhile, maybe your demand gen is actually using content syndication to send a lot of traffic to a white paper that they got an agency to write. And that doesn't necessarily mean not much to our buyers, right? And so this 4R formula was like the way to try and realign all these people and to try and say, hey, like if we really want our content, our story to reach the right people and lead to real results, well, we have to be working together towards these 4 things. And the first thing is choosing 3 or 5 topics that we feel are relevant to our buyers, but not only, right? It's not about talking only about what buyers care about, but you need to find something that's at the intersection of what they care about, what your company has expertise on, right? And then ideally, you want to be able to bring perhaps a different perspective or opinionated view on this, right? Because this is also what gets the attention, right? So it starts with that, finding the relevant 3 or 4 things that we want to talk about consistently. The second is this element of repetition. That's the second R. And this is basically where, hey, we take those 3 or 4 relevant topics and we make sure we repeat them. Repeat. And there we play with this concept of big rocks and atoms. We play with the formats, we play with the channels, but we make sure that instead of saying, oh, I have one story, I do one blog post, and then I move on to the rest, we really try to say, we have one story, we need to be telling it consistently over the next 6 to 12 months. So it's really a long-term play. And we want to make sure that we're doing that well. And then the third R is reach. And it's making sure that, hey, once we've built all that content that we feel is relevant, that we really leverage all our channels, all our expertise to make sure it gets sufficient reach. And that means using the earned channels a lot, LinkedIn, your website, whatever you own. And then the paid ones, of course. Sometimes you can also promote your content. That helps a bit. And so that's the approach we've been implementing with the team for the past, I would say, 6 to 8 months. And we're starting to really see the results. Like if we look at H1 this year compared to last year, I think we reached like 250% more people with our content. We've doubled the number of form fields. And one thing that we're really happy to see is that we've doubled the number of LLM referrals. So not only like the ChatGPTs and are sending more traffic to our website, it's doubled, but we also see in our benchmarks that we show up better in the LLM responses. And I think that's a trend that's something that a lot of marketers are thinking about. Is it's not just the buyer that we need to influence moving forward, it's the agents of the buyers, because we know a lot of the research now happens directly inside of Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini, right?
Of course. And, what do you think from the 4R formula, which part of that 4R formula do you think marketers tend to overlook the most?
It's definitely the repetition. And I think we have that in common with our target audience is short attention spans. And so, yeah, us as marketers, we tend to get bored with our own content and campaigns, faster than a toddler with a new toy, right? And so we're out there trying to build a category narrative, but then the team is already asking if we should launch a new channel or a new white paper, or, we're constantly switching from one topic to another. And I think coming back to AI, right? Like there's this major shift in the industry, which makes that the content now becomes it's infinite supply. Anyone can create content, and the amount of content that you can put out there is 10 times bigger. But what is not in infinite supply is the attention span of our audience, right? That's still limited. And so we have to work 10 times harder to catch their attention, because that's in limited supply. And they're being bombarded by content from us, from our competitors, from, on every channel. So if we want our stories to catch their attention, we have to repeat it. And then the question becomes, how do you repeat your story without sounding repetitive, right? And that's where we've been challenging ourselves to play a lot with the formats and the channels, the short forms, the podcasts, such as this ones, long form, videos, podcast, even keynotes, earned media, LinkedIn posts, article series. Like we really try to leverage all the formats possible and channels and make a lot of variations. So that instead of one story, one blog post, we say one story, but infinite variations. We do series, we break it down. We take a big asset, we break it down into atoms. And that's really the repetition that was the most impactful in our case.
Sounds great, Liz. That's very interesting. And you mentioned you try to leverage all sorts of channels to really reach audience and resonate with them. Is events a part of your strategies at Adyen as well?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, so we run already hundreds of events, right? Every year. And of course, with this shift of AI, like we've been wondering a lot, like, hey, what do we invest in for the next few years, right? And I think the reflection we've been having, and it's fed by many of the things we read, right? Like there's a lot of other people thinking about this, is this concept of legible and lovable brand. We don't have to choose between optimizing for AI agents or optimizing for humans. I think we need to do both, but we need to be very intentional about what we do to influence the LLMs and what we do to really create that emotional connection with our audience. And so now we're really trying to have this concept of, hey, we need to be machine readable, but we also need to be human lovable. And of course, events play a huge role in that human lovable part, because in the world where a lot of the content will be produced by our AI and perhaps consumed by the AI of our buyers, like what is left for humans? What are humans going to value? And we believe it's authenticity, real experiences, connection. And events play a big role in that. So I think that's definitely one of the things we're investing more and more in.
As you mentioned on your last question, you do like to leverage, of course, all sorts of channels to try to reach your audiences, whether that's digital or other channels as well. one of my questions is, do you run events at Adyen? And I'd love to get just a bit more of overview of what kind of events do you run? Because of course, a lot of companies like to focus on large scale, small scale. There's so many different formats depending on what you're looking for as well. So I'd love to hear more about what you've been experiencing at Adyen with events, and what has been working so far.
Yeah, well, good question. Yeah, of course, events are actually probably our main pipeline generation engine, to be honest, at Adyen. Why? Because we're an enterprise focused company. So a lot of it is based on relationship building, and the best way to build relationships is to meet people in person and look them in the eye. So we run hundreds of events every year. Some we attend and have booths at, like external events, and then some events that we own and organize. And there is not one type of event that we own, there's several. And I think this is where it's quite important to be super clear and intentional about what type of events are there to achieve what goal, right? And quite often teams try to achieve too much with one format. At Adyen, we really basically have different plays for events that we're really trying to be very consistent about. Some events are really there just for the connection, the relationship building. We want our customers and our partners to meet, to feel valued, to engage with us in an informal way. So those are actually very successful events. Every local market is running regularly these get-togethers, quite often at our own offices or sometimes in nice venues. And those are really about that connectivity and that human connection. And in these events, we actually don't present anything, right? We don't sell, we don't pitch, because the purpose is the connection. But we also have a different type of events which are much more there to educate. And those are sometimes roundtables, there's different formats, but they're there to share knowledge and discuss maybe industry trends or product updates with our community. And quite often they target a slightly different audience, perhaps the people that are working with our products every day. And there the goal is much more education. How do we make you better at your job? How do we help you keep up with industry shifts and changes, right? So I would say those are the two main types of events that we have and that we own and organize ourselves.
Very interesting, Louis. My next question for you is, what would you say is the biggest challenge B2B marketers face today?
There's many. I think there's many, but I do believe one of the main ones we're challenging is the navigating what I call the collapse of information trust, right? Because as we discussed, like AI has made the marginal cost of creating content effectively zero, right? So that means that every buyer's inbox, our LinkedIn feed, the search engines, they're drowning in the sea of fluff, AI slop, whatever you want to call it. It's usually perfectly structured. Like even the BDR outreach that land in my mailbox, they're way more personalized, but to a point that I know it's not a human behind it, right? So it feels personal, but I know it's not. And so as we were discussing, when that content is in infinite supply, but the buyer attention remains limited, right? I think that's the main challenge that we're facing. And the way we've been approaching this is to say, hey, we feel that the traditional way of creating content, like highly polished, dry blogs, automated cadences, I don't think they cut through anymore, right? And so I think we are all becoming adept at filtering out the noise. It's only been like AI has been what, 3-4 years, and already I think intuitively we've developed an ability to immediately spot this is AI or this is not, right? So our buyers are going through the same. So we think like to cut through the noise and still earn the attention of our buyers, we probably need to shift towards things that are a bit more raw, a bit more unpolished, a bit more authentic, and really focused on delivering real insights and real value through our engagements. And so I think playing the volume game in a world that's increasingly desensitized to this, I don't think it's gonna work anymore. And linked to that is another challenge, is that there's this problem of the measurement trap, right? A lot of the tactics that we've been using, we've used them because they're measurable. right? And so I think we've become addicted to the measurements, the clicks, the metrics, right? And yeah, it's no secret that a lot of the buying journey and a lot of the buyer research happens in what some people call the dark funnel.
Yeah.
And it's tough because, yeah, we know that's how you influence people, is by putting content out there on channels that you cannot necessarily measure or influence a lot, but that's how people do their research nowadays, right? And so, but it's hard for us to invest into that because the returns are hard to measure or to prove, and that makes sometimes an uncomfortable conversation with your CFO or your CEO, right? So yes, I think that's the main challenge, is we have to get comfortable doing things that are hard to measure in the short term, but that we believe will be impactful on the longer term, right? So
Definitely. I mean, it goes to it again. It kind of links to taking that risk, even though you can't prove ROI in the short term. And ROI is such an important word and aspect for marketers all over the world, right? But sometimes you just have to take those risks, do something, as you mentioned, in the long term, repeat and do it repetitively with high focus, and then measure that ROI in a longer cycle. What would you say instead, opposed to the challenge, what would you say nowadays, Louis, is the biggest opportunity for marketing leaders that, possibly didn't exist in the last 5 to 10 years?
I think coming back to that concept we were discussing earlier about making your brand machine-readable and human-lovable, both agentic and authentic, I think that's a very exciting opportunity, to be honest. And we have to accept that the game is changing. LLMs are going to play a big part, like Gen AI is there. And we really have to find, where do we create content and place to really influence the LLMs of our buyers, and where do we create content and place to really influence the human? And I think it's work in progress. I think it's going to be a lot of trial and errors, but I believe that the brands that can really achieve the right balance between the two, now they're the ones that will come out on top. That I think the opportunity is to start the discussion with your team about, hey, what are the plays that are really there to influence the LLM? Because we know our buyers are sending their agents at us, and we have to accept that new reality. And what are the things that we want to remain human? And and linked to that is also, I think this is more for the brand people out there, in a world where more and more your brand, your offering is going to be interpreted by machines. Like, how do you make sure that your brand, your uniqueness, your differentiation is understood by the machines so that they can actually render it?
Of course.
So when my buyer is asking about Adyen in ChatGPT or Claude, how do I make sure that the uniqueness of Adyen is reflected there? And that means that I really need to make my uniqueness, my DNA, machine readable. I need the AI, the LLM, to be able to interpret it correctly. If I don't do that, my value prop will be bland, and it will be compared to my competitors, and my uniqueness that we've spent so much time crafting will not permeate.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Louis, looking back at your journey as a marketing leader, what kind of career advice would you give to anyone who is trying to take the same path, who is also starting in marketing and is inspiring to be a marketing leader in the future?
Well, we're in June, so it's like mid-year performance reviews right now, and so I'm having a lot of discussions with our team members, and I think an advice that I find myself giving a lot of them is like, think about the business first, and the rest will flow. I noticed that too many people think about themselves, their career, their job title, their own KPIs, their own success metrics, and they say, look at this, I'm a star player. What are you going to do for me? And I often tell them, well, that should come second, right? It's the World Cup right now, and so, of course, in every team you have a star player, but if you have a star player but the team is not winning, and I think the people that do well and that I see growing are the ones that are able to come and have a discussion about, how do I make the team win? How do I make the team play in the bigger leagues? Instead of saying, how do I grow personally, or how do I get a fancier title? So yeah, the more you think about the business first and come to your stakeholders and your boss about saying, hey, I'm doing great, but I think as a team, we could be doing better. Here are my ideas for how we can elevate the whole game. Well, these are the people that usually do well.
Those are exactly traits that you would want in a leader, right? Someone who definitely is ambitious, but also wants the best for the team, for the company. In the end, whether you work in, one aspect of marketing or another aspect of marketing, the objective is the same, right? The outcome and the objective is the same. So I definitely agree on that one, Louis. I think that's great advice. My final and last question is, if you could ask marketing leaders such as yourself anywhere around the world one question, what would it be?
I think the question that's going through my mind a lot at the moment is, who do we hire next? I think that a lot of us are going through, like with all these changes and shifts, these things about, hey, do we invest more in events? Do we invest more in content? How do we really build an agentic marketing operating system? It's more like, what skills do we need? Like, whenever I have a headcount that opens up, like, do I hire an event manager? Do I hire a GTM engineer or forward deployed engineer, or do I still invest in content and copywriters? I think that's a key question that I'm asking myself. Like, what type of skill set are we going to need to build the next version of marketing?